and welcome to the meeting of the Audit Committee. I'm Councillor Keith Driver, Chair of the Audit Committee, and I'll be chairing the meeting to begin with as matters for housekeeping. Action in the event of emergency, there is no practice alarms planned for the meeting, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate City Hall by going down the main staircase and out to the War Memorial in front of the City Hall. Please would speakers use the microphone at all times directly into the microphone, and please mute them when you're not talking. The meeting is being live streamed on the Council YouTube channel. Members of the committee may use electricity devices to access their minute papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. But please use them discreetly and set them to silent, and do not use voicemail or camera flash functions. Before we like to start, I'd like to introduce our new independent member, John Snell. Up top there on the left-hand corner. Welcome, John. Would you like to introduce yourself to the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, John Snell. I am the new independent member. Just to give you a bit of background in terms of my field of activity. So it's pretty much in public sector, both in civil service and local government, but more so in local government. And my background is sort of governance, audit, and risk.
Right, members of the committee and officers to introduce us. Start on my left, going around the room. Georgia, your first time, and away you go.
Hello, I am Councillor Georgia Brumby of Mile Cross Ward for the Green Party.
Thank you.
Councillor Ash Jones, Lakeland Ward, Green Party.
Next.
Councillor Beth Jones, University Ward, Labour Party.
Councillor Kate Oliver, Town Close Ward, Green Party.
Thank you.
Councillor Ben Bryce. Councillor Mike Stonard, Wenston Ward, Labour Party.
Councillor James Wright.
Thank you. We know who John is already. David up the top.
Yes, thank you. David Harwood. I'm the independent member.
Brilliant. Thank you. And coming down the right hand side.
I'm Teresa Sharman, Head of Internal Audit.
Hello, I'm Director of People and Organisational Culture.
Hi, I'm Isabel Britton. I'm the Interim Director of Finance.
Robert Carmichael, Democratic Services Manager.
Alex Cosme, Senior Committee Officer.
Thank you. We move on to the agenda now. And the first one on the agenda is apologies. Have we received any? No, that's really good for the first meeting. Declarations of interest, anyone? No? Excellent. Public questions and petitions. I understand there's no public question or petition being advised. And we move on to the next item, which is election of Vice Chair. And we need a nomination. Any nominations, anyone? Well, I'll nominate Ben. Have we got a seconder? Thank you, Kate. Any other nominations, anyone? No? So you've been elected as Vice Chair, Ben. Oh, do we need a vote? All those in favour, please show. That's near enough. That's unanimous now. Ben, if you'd like to join us up here. You want to join us up here? Okay, we move on now to the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of March. Is there any accuracies for the people who were here? Any matters raised or accuracies for the minutes? No, thank you. Do we agree they're a correct record? Agreed. Thank you. And we need to go to a vote for that as well. All those in favour, please show. Who were here? Thank you. Carried. And we start on the exciting bits. Item 5, and we have this progress report, the internal audit activity, pages 11 to 64 of your agenda. And I'll hand over to Teresa to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our last progress report for 25-26. You've got the last executive report summaries for the 7 audits. They're all positive assurances apart from the planned housing maintenance audit where I've given a split opinion. So We were hoping to do a bit more testing as the audit came to the end, because one of the recommendations covers the approval process for the works costs, which were based on, I suppose, the old process and the old contracts. But unfortunately, there wasn't enough valuations and works coming through on the new contracts for us to go and reconfirm the improvements that they had put in place. So we agreed to go over split opinion, and you'll see that management have given quite a few comments for all of the recommendations to give you a bit more update about what they were putting in place on that one. You've also got the follow-up audit for the DBS check audit that was done in 24-25. So although one of the recommendations has been implemented, there are still some outstanding. I think now we've got the new director in place, we'll see much more speed up and improvement in that. But obviously, if you've got any questions, then Kerry's here to answer any of those. In terms of outstanding recommendations, there's 12 outstanding, so we've been doing really well on where we've made recommendations, getting these implemented. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Just want to ask a quick one. So I see the policy framework, council's 8 corporate priorities, which are, did you have any problems with the different priorities set up for the council this year?
Was that in relation to, Chair?
On front page policy framework, the council's 8 corporate priorities, which are a council that listens, getting the basic rights, sustainable city, investing wisely, new and improved housing, an equal, thriving, independent city, and healthier neighbourhoods. I wonder if that made any difference the way you were looking at the audit committee, forward or backwards. Because last year there was 5 other priorities, wasn't there?
I'm not too sure, Chair, I understand the question, but obviously I've picked up on the new priorities for my covering paper. When I did the audit plan, when we come on to that, obviously we had the old priorities when we were planning. So when we go through the planning process next time, then we'll be picking up on the new priorities. But it might be with management, I can go through and we can align the audits against the new priorities when we go to the assurance board.
Yeah.
And we can always do that if that helps.
That was what I was trying to ask about, put any problems in with the new priorities, that was all. Okay, anyway, any questions, anyone on this, Beth?
Yeah, it's on the split opinion on the housing. Just sort of interested to understand how you're working with housing around this, because it seems quite a difference of opinion in some respects on this. And I suppose just wanting to understand how we're so far apart with that, and is there any sort of other issues we need to be aware of, I suppose, or just how we're so different with that?
I think the difference in the view is because the process they had in place, they weren't really quite following. So we like to see a commitment to expenditure being approved before you've then gone away and done the work. And how it works in building work, which is what this is, they'll do an estimate of what the work is going to cost against the schedule of rates. And then they'll go out and do the work. And because it's building work, sometimes, as you might know, when you have a contractors in, they say, I need to change the tap as well now. So there's extra work come in. And then, so therefore, when they send in the actual cost, there'll be some variations. Now, the idea is that in the process, both bits are approved. They weren't quite doing that, as I understood, and therefore they were waiting for the certificate of payment to come through with the valuations, and then they were going through the whole process with the contractors at that point. Now, although that's fine in a way, because you can argue it out then, but it just means if you have a disagreement at that point, then some of the payments are on hold until you've sorted that out. They're saying there weren't any major disputes, but it's a kind of backward way of doing it in terms of if you're committing to something, you want to be able to approve it at that point and then approve the minor variations that occur. So in the new process, I think they're getting more towards that. But waiting until you get your certificate and then kind of agreeing any variations that have occurred at that point is not the best controlled way of doing it, and that's why we differ a little bit. But I think the new process is coming more into line with what we would expect.
Yeah, I suppose it's where the crossover with audit and delivery, and I suppose that's where I'm trying to get my head around, because with a housing stock of 14,000+, it's massive, and we don't want, yes, we want to have a robust process, and I'm all for that, but at the same time we need flexibility so tenants aren't inconvenienced of lots of extra process in some respects. And how does that work together? Because that's been a problem, we know, on a practical level. Around the delivery side of things having to go back, and the whole point was to try and remove repeated checks in a sense, so things are delivered quicker. So I just want, I guess, an understanding of how that benefits the tenant in that, as well as having assurance.
But I think if the benefit to the tenant is that if you are estimating your works and agreeing that cost at that point, then you're not going to get to the stage where if you don't do that and you wait till the work's done and then all of this comes in that you weren't expecting, you could be paying for things that you weren't expecting, and then there's too much cost and you haven't budgeted for it, and then you can't do as much as you were. So that you're right, there is that balance between trying to make sure you don't make the process too onerous, but it is, I suppose, quite bog standard within the building industry to follow the schedule of rates, agree the work, have an estimate of the work. Because if a builder's going in to replace the toilet in a house, the scheduler rates roughly, you know, they pull off the different bits and it gives you the estimated cost. You shouldn't really expect it to vary too much, but obviously little bits happen when they change stuff. It's just a better way of having certainty of costs without kind of overspending on your budget. But we audit to the process that they say. So if they said to us, that's how it works, we audit against that. So they were not quite doing what they said, and therefore then you get into, well, how are you controlling costs? How are you going to deal with unexpected costs? What happens right at the end of the process if you find he's changed the toilet and rebuilt the wall and you weren't happy with that and you didn't think that was the right work? He's done it, you've got to pay for it. So there's those sorts of risks that come into it. That's why we don't like the agreeing it right at the end, because you could be paying for works that you perhaps thought, was that really necessary? It's too late when the work's done, you've got to pay for it. It depends how their relationships are with their contractors as well, because there's lots of verbal talking going on. It's not like the managers and that don't know what's going on. So it's, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We'll get used to this. Thank you. I was just looking on sort of page 1 or page 17 of 168. And I was just looking at the RAG status against the recommendations. And I was just wondering whether you could give us an indication of the types of issues and recommendations that are being raised.
What's the page, sorry?
It's 17.
So that page is kind of giving you that picture of the number of recommendations and that have been raised and the status of the audits. Is that the page we're on?
Really what I'm trying to get to is what type of themes are these recommendations based on?
Well, because they're based on reports that have already come through, I don't know that off the top of my head. Okay. You've got the exec summaries of the ones that are finalised in this progress report since the last one. So you can see the themes further down in one of the appendices, what's coming out of each report. There's a little summary section and then you get a bit more detail. But any analysis I do tends to be later on, either for the annual report or part of planning work. I don't do it for individual progress reports at the moment as such.
Just wondering whether, as we move forward, whether it will be helpful to members to have almost, I refer it to as a root cause analysis. I don't know whether you're familiar with that.
Have we already got these? And
We do, the auditors will do some root cause analysis for their audits where it's relevant. They've all had the training in it, and the contractors have signed up to it. But whether that comes through in the audit reports or not, I'm not so sure it does all of the time. What I do is with our root cause analysis categories, I put all of the recommendations for the year through them and do the analysis, and that brings out themes. So when we get onto the audit plan, you'll see there's an audit theme section where I've analysed the recommendations for 24-25, because obviously 25-26 wasn't available when I did the plan, and it shows you which two categories most of the recommendations falls into and what that means. And those themes, I think, naturally are scopes of most audits anyway, but the contractors will pick up those themes in their scopes of audit. So that's where you can see some analysis about what the root cause, which root causes the recommendations are falling in. But I haven't done that for 25-26 yet because we've only just finished all of the reports. So at some point I will do that.
Yeah.
But it's been done for 24-25.
Okay, yeah, it's just really useful to have that correlation between what are those themes and what are the issues, whether that's specific to service areas, whether it's a corporate issue, etc., whether it's a training, oversight, management, processes, etc. And I think that's really, really useful to help members get that understanding of where perhaps the risks lie across the service areas.
okay, thank you for that, John. Ash.
Thank you, Chair. On DBS checks, are we holding subcontractors to the same standards? Are we asking them to have DBSs as well?
In my 3 months of being here, I haven't looked into our procurement, but actually that's a really good point. So I could follow up on that and provide an update in the next committee.
Okay, anyone else? David first.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. A question the council was asked earlier about the SNP and AMP, I now understand, which was in the recommendation. But just can we go back to page 23, please? And the second paragraph in the assurance opinion, it says in there that it looks like the SNP and the AMP forms are reconciled, and then a purchase order is raised after the event. So in effect, all the work's been done, it's checked off, and then a purchase order is being raised. Isn't the commitment when the SMP, I mean, I don't know how the commitment accounting system works in the council, but isn't the commitment for the cost there when the SMP is raised and authorised, and the AMP is just agreeing what the final invoice should be? So my question really is that the purchase order is being raised retrospectively, and I don't know if that's in accordance with financial regs or the procurement rules. You might know the answer either, Teresa, but that's the thing that jumped out at me. Thank you.
I think in building work, if you think the process they follow, they don't follow the kind of process we would normally. If I was going to buy some pens or something, I'd raise a purchase order. In building work, it's different. That they raise that the AMP and the SNP are really their kind of equivalent versions of their purchase order, and then because you've got the estimated works of we're going to fix the toilet, scheduler rates tells you what those activities are, what the price is, and the time, and that gives you that cost that then gets approved. And then they go and do that work. There might be a bit of variation, and then the other AMP, I think it is then, or the SMP is the final version where they might not have needed to do some things, but needed to do other things. And then it's their raising of the purchase order then is at that point. There's other processes in place with the building work. It's not quite the same process as you would follow for purchasing a normal item.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come back on that? I used to be a contract auditor, so I'm really aware of how building and civil engineering works. Can I ask then in that case that if that process has been followed, maybe an efficiency could be made by not raising a purchase order, but the AMP being used as that particular document and save some people some time. But again, obviously, no doubt that might have been thought about and dismissed, but that's just a sort of by the by. Can I come on, if I can, to another question on page 32, on the 32 of 168. It's just a case that I think there might be a mistake with the implementation date shown. I'm presuming it should be 2026, but it might not be. But I'm just wondering. And finally, if I may, Chair, on page 52 of 168, there's reference there, unfortunately, back to safeguarding. And safeguarding has been discussed by this committee all the time I've been on it, and it was raised in 2022. We've had officers in front of us explaining what they were going to do to address the issues, and it's really disappointing, I feel, that there's been no progress made. Well, there has been some progress, but not as much as we were led to believe when officers sat in front of us. And again, I don't know, committee wish to proceed with that. It's obviously not my decision, but I think that's really disappointing for the committee to see. Thank you, Chair.
We do have safeguarding training in place and we monitor the safeguarding training compliance. It's an area that we are constantly talking about with the teams. From a DBS and pre-employment side of things, we have we've provided internal training for the team, and I now have a gap analysis report in place every month, so I can see.
The day that you thought they contract.
But you're to.
Sorry?
You thought they contracted or?
No, I'm just saying it's disappointing that there are recommendations still outstanding from issues that were raised by internal audit back in 2022. And then again, when they did a follow-up review, which I think, I can't remember it's in this report or the next one where it talks about the work that's been done there. That's the issue really, is that if something goes wrong, you know, it could be somebody that we're employing that's not DBS checked, and heaven forbid they do something that's inappropriate, it will come back upon this council. And the fact that audit committee have raised this on a number of occasions and it's still not being addressed is a real concern.
Councillor Podge.
Thank you, Chair. I think some good points have been made on some of the internal audit reports. I think I've got comments on a number of them, but I think if we want to pick up the sort of safeguarding, yeah, I guess one of the questions is how many council employees are currently working in public facing or sensitive roles without verified DBS clearance or an active signed role adjustment form on their file? So how many are there?
There was 2 colleagues that had commenced in post, but with a risk assessment in place. So they were under supervised practice whilst we were awaiting their DBS. And those checks are back.
Okay, and that also applies to retrospectively employed staff already. So it's only 2 at the moment.
Only 2 when we reviewed them.
Okay, well that gives us some assurance, yeah.
And we now have gap analysis report in place on a monthly basis. So we review who our new starters are each month and when their checks, including the references and the DBS checks, were undertaken, so that we can establish and do that look back every month in, month out, to make sure that we are fully compliant with the audit recommendations and they are embedded in our practice. I now am the sign off for any exceptions and risk assessments, and what I'd like to get to is we have no sign offs and that we have no exceptions and risk assessments. We have on average a 9-week time to hire window, so that is plenty of time for the vast majority of DBS checks to be back.
Ben, you got another one?
Yeah, well, just to come back on that. So thank you. I think that's good assurance to show that although the risk was there, that the actual overall risk coverage of it was fairly low. I suppose I'd make the point that the new draft policy, I mean, we've basically been talking about this for about 2 years at the committee, and it's a risk that we've kind of highlighted, you know, and it's a reputational risk as well, you know. And so at the moment, you know, you've got the new draft DBS policy, But you know, that's remains unimproved at the moment. And so if you can provide some comment on that, but I guess also, so I would also kind of yeah, no, if you could answer that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Of course. So the policy has been discussed with both trade unions and with our senior leadership colleagues, and it is in the process of being distributed and implemented with an enhanced toolkit with all managers aware of what the standards and the requirements are. And we're now updating our, we've got a finance and a HR system that we use called Unit 4 that has all of our colleagues on, and we are building all the compliance checks into our Unit 4 usage so that we will have system coverage as well as a process to make sure it's fully embedded.
So just the final question on that is just when will that policy be fully implemented, and when will the Unit 4 software be fully populated? Thank you.
Is a bit of a longer process because we're having to work with our external partner in order to update our processes and the behind the scenes screens. So that may take a little bit longer, and I'll be able to provide an update to the next audit committee on the progress, if that's helpful. In terms of when we expect to be fully rolled out with the policy, it will be by the end of this month.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, if I can just aspects to that, so I don't know whether that's the sort of covered with the policies I've not.
Thank you. So prior to working in local authorities, I worked in the NHS. I'm very familiar with DBS requirements and highly regulated activity. So there is a DBS criteria where you assess each role and look at the levels of DBS, because there are 3 levels. So we've done that for all of our roles across the whole organisation. That has been implemented. That's the bit that I'm now trying to migrate from a paper-based record held on our shared drive to the system, so that we, every time somebody leaves and we replace that role, we know the level of DBS check. In terms of the follow-up audit, we've just had the follow-up audit literally a month ago, and we are in progress, and I expect all of those actions to be fully implemented and embedded by the end of the summer.
Thank you. I've got 2 more, then I think we'll move on. Beth?
So yeah, apologies, DBS again, as someone who works in the NHS as well. So I suppose, firstly, are we expecting colleagues to have signed, officers to have signed up to the update service? And then secondly, following on from that, the DBS that people receive in the post is only as good as the date it is issued on. What's the internal process for doing spot checks? Because I know if I log on, I can see when my NHS Trust checked my DBS. What's our process going to be for that?
Thank you. So yes, we are signed up to the update service for all colleagues that have DBS checks now. And in terms of, that's the next piece of work that we need to do. So we haven't at the moment got a rolling programme of DBS checks. So in the NHS, it was quite standard practice to do it every 3 years, which is good practice. Of course, they are only valid for the day that they're done. Spot checks, DBS themselves, because I've spoken to DBS about them, they don't recommend that you do spot checks. They recommend that you have a rolling programme and that it is well known and established in your organisation, and the standard across public sector organisations is a 3 to 5 year, but 3 is considered best practice. So that's the policy that we're working on and developing at the moment.
James?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully this will be the last question on DBS. You sound from what you're saying that you're reasonably confident from a direct hire perspective, I guess I'm interested in particularly some of the stuff that's being talked about in the new policy, but where we are on outsourcing arrangements. What degree of certainty do you have that every subcontractor who is walking in through a front door of one of our residents on behalf of the council in one form or another is checked appropriately? And what certainty as a committee can we take away on that? Thank you.
So I've been in post for 3 months. In between Councillor Jones's first question around subcontractors, I've emailed one of our procurement team to ask to see the copy of the standard procurement contract. I now need to keep my eye on our internal processes, making sure that they're fully embedded against the audit requirements and best practice. But now I need to turn my attention to looking at what we do from a partner and any organisations that we subcontract to. So I will be able to provide you with a much better update at the next audit committee.
But I think, okay. So I mean, at the moment, it's possibly a little bit of a blank canvas then in terms of the best knowledge that you have is hopefully okay, but you can't be 100% sure because of relatively new enroll, etc.
No, I wouldn't want to give you as a committee any level of assurance because I actually haven't looked at even the contract wording yet. So I will do that with our procurement team, and then I'll be able to provide you with an update on where my level of confidence and assurance is to the committee at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Kate.
Thank you. So my question's not on DBS, it's on I suppose I'm using right to buy as an illustration of potential wider issues or a question about them. Within the assurance opinion, you can see that there's a few things that went wrong at the same time, and quite often in looking back, there isn't just one thing that's awry. Circumstances conspire to make things particularly difficult as well. And I was wondering, is there resource for resilience that we can move into place quickly when a situation seems to be developing in a way that we wouldn't wish? So with the right to buy, for example, there was the political change of the amount of discount being changed. So obviously, people that were thinking that direction were hurrying to, to put in their requests. And there was a couple of other factors that were mentioned, like an IT and a recruitment issue as well. So given that we do get perfect storms, or at least perfect thunderclouds at times, how quickly can we move to put resource in? Thank you.
So generally speaking, that's why we have our reserves. That's why we have our contingency sitting there in order to do that. I think the issue sometimes is, though, probably like with the right to buy, is getting the right people in quickly and those right systems in quickly. But yeah, we keep resources, as in funding, aside in order to deliver those as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay, John.
Thank you. In terms of performance reporting, is there any sort of intention to report on applications that are refused as opposed to those that are accepted? And I'm only thinking in terms of money laundering issues. I don't know whether that's part of the audit, whether you look at that and report on applications that are refused and the reason for refusal.
Being reported risk.
I think we can take that one away. Thanks, John, because I think it's highlighted in the report, isn't it, that the KPIs are probably not as robust as they possibly can be. So I think that's probably an item to take away. Just for the committee, Davina's actually coming to the next committee to provide some information about the housing regulator and obviously the scoring that she got. So I think some of these questions as well we can address and talk to Davina about generally at the next committee meeting. Thank you.
I'm not going to be here till 8 o'clock tonight, so if people have got a lot of questions, I would advise they should have come in before the meeting. You read the papers last week. Beth?
Apologies, Chair. This is more, I suppose, because I haven't been in audit for many years, but just wondering what the oversight process is between audit committees for the actions in here. And is there an escalation process, particularly for the urgent actions? But because we can sometimes have several months between committees to make sure those don't fall behind.
So we have a follow-up process. So each month, the contractor will contact the council and contact all the people who have their name against a recommendation and ask for an update. And then that gets plugged into the system. And I don't think you use the Power BI, but we do have a Power BI which we use at our end that tells us where we are with all the figures. But between the council and the contractor and myself, we do that process and everything gets updated and we know where we are. And then obviously one of those months or one of those times is then used to feed into the progress report, which you get today. So there is a process in place.
Georgina.
Yeah, so this one's just with regard to housing. How confident are we that the current sort of software that it seemed when I read the papers that NEC, I think that was what it was called, NEC is not being used most effectively to manage maintenance schedules. What is sort of in a nutshell, the plan to make sure that that is sorted? Because I'm getting a lot of casework through at the moment that's often around, I think, issues that are posed by this, not using this software consistently.
Who's taking that one as well?
Yeah, can I take that one away and present that to Davina? Because if Davina's coming, she's probably going to give you a really good update on obviously the outcomes from the audit and how they've moved forward. And they've done a lot of work, obviously, to rectify some of the issues that have arisen.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks.
Okay, David, and I'm going to move on to the next report.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just come back to the question that was raised about follow-up of audit recommendations? Councillor Price, when he was chair, I seem to recall pushed for officers to attend after a certain number of months that an action on the internal audit report was overdue. That happened once, maybe twice, maybe once. So I think maybe if officers could go back and look at that, I think maybe it'd be useful, maybe in the minutes of the next meeting, to say that we've referred to it, and could it actually be included within the minutes so it's refreshed for us all to see what was actually agreed, please? Would that be possible?
Who's going to say that, Isabel?
I can take that back and we can consider that if that's what the committee would like us to do.
Well, that's what audit actually recommended, that if they were getting behind, they had to come in front of us in the end. Okay. And the only person we had was HR, I believe, before she left.
We'll look that up and then take action on it. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to we've got the recommendation for the reports. Members review and note the completion of the 25-26 internal audit plan and progress with implementation recommendations. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. Move on to item 6 now, the internal audit.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Could we just have a very quick break so I can speak to you?
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming back. We will continue. We're on item 6 now, is the internal audit annual options report 25-26, pages 65 to 92 in the report, and I'll hand over to Teresa Sharman to this report. Thank you.
I won't say too much because I'm sure there'll be questions. I'll just briefly outline the opinion report for you. So this year, I've provided a reasonable assurance opinion on risk management, governance and internal control. You'll see there that I have relied on the third-party assurance. The regulator who did their inspection has provided lots of positive assurance around housing services, which I've relied on, which is detailed for you. And as we've said previously, Davina is coming next time to go through that with you. What I've done is there's kind of two statements, the summary and the detail. So the summary is based on an analysis of the detail. And I've done that so that it highlights for you where some of the weaknesses are from the limited reports and the outstanding recommendations, but also where some of the positives are from the third-party assurances. And that gives you an idea of also where the council's risk exposure is in relation to those weaknesses. So just trying to do some interpretation for you so that you're aware of that. In terms of the other sections, you'll see there is a section about performance indicators of the contractor, the main contractor who's in place, and you'll see that their performance is not particularly great. We've now got a new director who I'm talking to about their performance, and we've been talking about the KPIs and then putting, I suppose, a bit more time into looking at their KPIs and trying to achieve them. I think at times they could do more to challenge whether they have met them or not, because I think we've talked about before in the committee that sometimes the delays are not their fault, they're officers' fault, council fault. And I think if they did more work, they could evidence that and challenge not getting a KPI sometimes. But there's only so much I can do to help them to try and encourage them to do more work on that. And as you'll see, if they don't achieve their KPIs, they don't get all of their quality payment, and they didn't this time, they only got half of it. In terms of the quality assurance and improvement programme, at some point I'll do some training with the new members so you understand what this is all about. But for now, I haven't done a self-assessment because I had a gap analysis against the new standards, and there'll be an action plan which I'll bring to the committee, which we can then talk about what that's all about, and I can explain a bit more about it. But you will get that at one of the committees coming up. I'll go to questions now, Chair. Thank you.
Very much for that. Can I just ask, we got just on page 71, which is at the bottom, you got 53 talk recommendations raised in a year. Is there any correspondence about how many you raised last year or the year before, or is this a big number, or is this roughly what it should be, or less?
I can't remember what it was last year, actually. There isn't, I mean, you could say the least amount of recommendations you have is better, but
Even better as well.
Less is more, I think, in this case. But I don't, you can't, you know, there's always going to be, there's likely to be recommendations, because audit is about improvement as much as the kind of stick to say you've not done something. So even if you just had a few recommendations, that could still be a good thing.
Okay.
So 50, not too bad compared to the other councils as well. You know.
Okay, fine. And just one other thing, you got 3 deferred and 1 cancelled. What were they ones? Are they in the report somewhere and I missed it?
Is in the report and it's in appendix.
Ocean delivery. Yeah, I found it.
Have you found it? Yeah, page
81.
Yeah, 81, 82, and we've put in that they were previously reported in the progress reports, but I've actually put in why were they deferred. A lot of them because they were going to be covered by the regulated inspection, and we've got their assurance.
Thank you. Members, anyone? Questions? John, thank you.
Yeah, that's not being too long. I think actually the recommendations should total 52. I wasn't the best at maths, but I think it should be 52 rather than 53. Just interesting with the audit opinion for 25-26, how does that compare to last year? So it would give the assurance to members that the control environment, the risk and general governance arrangements are either stable, whether they've improved or even got worse.
So last year was reasonable, but we gave a limited opinion for the governance of the wholly owned companies. So it's the same assurance apart from the wholly owned companies bit.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for bringing the report. So just want to highlight, and officers correct me if I'm wrong, but both the quarterly report and the annual report should have been delivered by the last meeting at the end of the cycle. So we're a little bit behind already, and we'll be talking about the audit plan in the next item. But I just want to highlight the fact that we're starting a little bit behind with reports being signed off, completed and presented to committee. But I think we'll pick that up in the audit plan. Also in the audit plan, there is on page 101 of the overall agenda, you've got the audit themes. And so, you know, I want to make comments about your overall report for this year, because I think you've picked up in the themes for the audit plan some of the issues that we've seen across the year. So I'll just want to read this bit of the section here. So recommendations made in 24-25 found that the categories of timely, accurate date and information and communications, reporting cadence, data quality and validation, reconciliations, evidence and audit trail, website publishing, also and robust roles and responsibilities, accountabilities and authorities. These are the kinds of issues where, you know, that I think you've identified really well through this year's plan, through this year's delivery of work, and have been kind of things that I've always had a concern about, because what we keep getting in reports is that there are a myriad of places where information is stored. Maybe some of it's digital, some of it's paper, that there are some policies in place, some of them are not updated, some of them are not actually overseen. And so that I think that's a sort of a wider weakness there that I think you've identified really well. And because it seems to come out quite consistently across a lot of areas of the council you're looking at, that feels to me like that's a kind of a, you know, an inherent sort of cultural issue across the council. So with that all said, and we're taking it as the result of the year, I wonder if both officers and the internal officer would give comments on my views and assumptions about that particular area, please. Either whoever first, but both, please.
Well, you're right. That's where the analysis comes out. Was I surprised? Maybe not. I thought, you know, because I see the reports come through and the issues that are coming through, so I wasn't maybe overly surprised that those two were the top categories. So I guess what would be interesting to see when I repeat it for the 25-26 recommendations, which now everything's finalised I can do, are these going to be the same two categories again? And if they were, then maybe that's a conversation for us at the assurance board meetings to say, what do we think about that? What does that mean? Is there anything in the plan we want to change? How do we take that information forward and that analysis? And that's the whole point of insight, which is when we did the training, we talked about insight and foresight, didn't we? And this is now bringing out some insights, and we've got to use that in some way to say, okay, what do we do now? We've got this. I mean, if we can compare year on year, then again, that's more insight for us to say, okay, are these truly themes? Is there an inherent problem that we need to think about how we deal with that? So yes, that's my view on where we are.
Just before the officer comes in, I think that's absolutely right. Also, you've got built-in time in your plan to kind of adjust and increase. But I think we are seeing a theme there. So I do hope that is kind of sort of discussed further. Obviously, council is always on a transition process, but also we need, and we will look at risks later in the report. But obviously, we've got to be kind of ready to go on day one for LGR and have a continuation of services, which is obviously massive risk area. So I think that more and more the focus of the audit plan needs to be able to make sure that we are going to be compliant for the day one of LGR as well. Thank you. But officers, thank you.
Thank you. It's definitely one of the areas that we've talked about. So we're currently, part of my new role is I'm scoping some leadership development. We need to strengthen our governance processes and make sure they're as responsive but embedding the changes as possible so that we don't see a continuation of themes coming through our audits. And we need to take that learning and almost operationalise it with how we have an assurance meeting once a month, and we need to make that more robust. And we've already, as officers, talked about that. And Lou, our chief exec, is very keen that we get much more accountability in our leadership teams and within individual roles. So that's what I'm working on, and looking at a leadership framework that supports embedding both values and behaviours, but making sure that we deliver for all of our residents.
Absolutely. Chair, just to say there was another part of that wasn't quite answered, and that's around those kind of discrepancies of process, and so it's also about the systems that are kind of in place, and are they fit for purpose, and are they actually being implemented? So it's not just that kind of structure of kind of responsibility, but it's that kind of oversight and checking on our works, and also that overall risk of having multiple sources of data and systems sort of all over the place, you know, for want of a better phrase, as you go through modernisation. And so can you give me some assurance around that aspect as well, please?
We do have quite a few systems, as most councils do, to be honest. Local government reorganisation gives us the perfect opportunity to really look at what we need and be able to come at it from that approach, rather than be in a cycle where we're either extending contracts or going to the market. So we can do that baseline work right from the get-go. But there is an absolute commitment to make sure our systems are as effective and efficient, and that we can roll that throughout the organisation.
Is it actually better to have more than one system? Because if you lose one, you lost a lot.
Yeah, that.
So we've got to be careful about how many systems we actually go down to, haven't we? That's why we put everything into one folder, but then something that's disappeared, then we're in trouble then.
Yeah, but we do have an ongoing transformation programme where we're trying to ensure that we're working with the most up-to-date systems. We're making sure the systems that we've used, we're fully utilising their capability, and that we're moving more to that digital platform rather than it being.
And we back up every night as well, don't we all? Yes, so which is good policy as well.
Absolutely.
Any other questions on the report, David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I just may join in with a comment that Councillor Price has made there, and also the ones John made earlier about root cause analysis. Really what you're asking, Councillor Price, is what's gone wrong, and can we have that summarised, please? And I think that would be really useful for the committee to receive, because in many instances, root cause analysis is something just as simple as nobody's been told to do it. So the problem was nobody was told to do something, so an error occurred. I mean, I don't live in the district, but I read the Norwich paper. You've got an issue with bird poo outside. The root cause is people are feeding pigeons. Yeah.
Touchy subject.
Oh,
Well,
so you say, David.
well, can I say there's a really good case study based on monuments on the Mall in Washington about how much it cost to repair them each year, and the root cause of it was people were feeding birds.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyhow, I digress. Can I come back to the report, please? Can I ask about on page 80? There's a reference there to homelessness and temporary accommodation. Back at the February meeting, I asked a question about how a recommendation had been made and accepted by officers based on internal audit, taking a sample of 3 invoices. The minutes of the meeting show the head of internal audit was to provide a response to my question outside the meeting. Has a response been provided?
I definitely got a response. Maybe I didn't provide it on to Alex. We'd have to check. I definitely.
Yeah, we'll have to check, but we could circulate it if it hasn't come around already.
Please, because I've not received anything. Thank you, and I don't know if others has. Thank you. Can I also ask about page 86, please? And on page 86, at the top of the page, when I just turn it up, there's talk there about contractors not having met targets. And again, you said performance isn't great. But the final sentence says the contract's been re-procured. Can I ask, has there been any discussion internally about the council continuing to obtain internal audit services through the partnership agreement with South Norfolk Council?
You don't really want to answer that one, do you, Teresa?
There's a consortium meeting where all the Section 151s come together, which we are due to have quite shortly. If the council wanted to leave the consortium, then they can do that through that meeting, or they can write to us and outline what they want to do. But the partnership arrangement's in place and it works because everyone's in it. So if one party was to leave, then all other parties will probably have to consider whether it can carry on and work if one drops out. But I don't think anyone wants to drop out, and everyone's happy as far as I know.
Okay, can I just follow up on that then, please? And can I ask, has the effectiveness of the arrangement been reviewed since the council joined in 2022? Because the issue is generally, if you go into a contract, when it comes to its conclusion, at some point within the previous 12 months, somebody does a review of, are we happy with the service? I mean, we've had discussions about the performance of the contractor each year that I've been here. We've had discussions about why the audit plan's not being delivered. And I think, you know, if officers haven't had a discussion about are we happy with the effectiveness of the arrangements, I think that's not particularly good. So again, I don't need a response on that particular question, but
I think you've got to get one.
I'd say.
Well,
there's two things that go on here, because the arrangement with the contractor is with us and the consortium who host it. That's our responsibility at South Norfolk and mine. So the contract that's coming to the end is the contractor who does the audits. So they're not our only contractor now. So I am talking to procurement about what's my procurement plan, what are my options, and what is the best thing. And there are arguments to stay with the main contractor. But the arrangement, as in Norwich being in the partnership arrangement of the fact that there is a arrangement for internal audit services that is provided to all the councils in Norfolk other than the county, which I am the head of audit for, that's a different thing. That I don't know whether that actually does come to an end unless someone says they don't want it, or whether that's reviewed. So I'd have to go back and look at that partnership arrangement and talk to South Norfolk and say, do we ever review it? Because I've only been here 2.5 years. So I don't know if that arrangement's ever reviewed with everyone to say, are we still all happy? I suspect as part of LGR that is going to be done, because how we then move forward with internal audit under LGR will cause the arrangement to be looked at anyway, and whether it's split up and you have the 3 unitaries have their own, or whether it stays as a partnership arrangement and carries on in the same sort of way. So that will happen, but I don't know whether it ever has done in the past.
As well.
I'll take your point away, David, but I think Teresa just stole my thunder. The LGR issue is probably what we're looking at the moment, and part of the work stream that I've been assigned to is looking at internal audit across the whole of Norfolk. So we'll be looking at that and thinking about what the delivery of that looks like for the whole of Norfolk, and what makes sense to what we do next, basically.
Any other questions, anyone? Oh no, well, the recommendation for that one is members review and note the completion of the 25-26 internal audit plan and progress with implementing recommendations. Do we all agree with that? Agreed. Thank you. Move on to item 7 is the internal audit plan. It's Teresa Sue again, I'm afraid.
So this is the internal audit plan for 26-27. So the way we approached planning this year was to meet with the executive directors and have a chat with them about their risks and any issues and lots of other things actually. And as a result of that, we put a plan together, and that then goes to the assurance board where we talk again together about it so that everyone gets an overview of what everyone else has put in. And we also started to think about some audits for 27-28. So you'll see that the plan, there is a few audits that we've already kind of pushed into the following year as well. I've taken the corporate risk register as my audit or my risk universe, and then as I describe in there, the service areas and the corporate priorities are all the audit universe. And I think in previous meetings with the previous audit committee members, we talked about me bringing you the audit and risk universe so that you could see what that was and understand that. And again, we can do that as part of one of the training sessions, so you see what that is. But otherwise, you have the internal audit plan there in the appendix 2. We've obviously started Q1 audits because we don't want to delay the start. So hopefully everyone's happy with those. We think you probably will be, they are the right audits, I think, for us to be looking at. You've also got the charter and mandate. So again, when we do the training, I'll go through in more detail what they're about, but the mandate is the kind of regulations that say that local authorities have internal audit, and then the charter runs through the roles and responsibilities and oversight, scope of work and independence and things like that. This time, for those who have seen it before, it's been updated for the SIT for local government application note. Again, in the training, we'll talk about the differences between that and the global standards, but the application note just says for public sector some of the things that we have to follow outside of the standards. But it's been updated for the Nolan principles, some communication aspects and qualifications. Happy to go to questions, Chair.
Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing the report and obviously giving us some assurance that it's already underway. So just a few comments from myself. As the new chair of licensing and regulatory, I'm very pleased to see that you've got the environmental health licensing on there. And as I'm getting back into licensing, I think that's very timely for you to be looking at that area, because there are some areas of improvement and some inconsistencies, and we can better deliver, particularly as it has a relevancy to the protection of the public. So I appreciate that you've included it in there. I also like how that you've got the corporate risks on the opening page, and then you've addressed those in the plan. And I think that I think that the one that I would say that I think they're all important, I would say, but what noticing from the work that I've been doing both here, but perhaps more so on the corporate committee at county, is the ever-growing risk of LGR, and that's not having people playing silly political games at county to actually undermine a process that is already difficult to deliver. But obviously that should, when we get to the risk register, that will need to be included and updated, the actions that county are taking at the moment. But with all the best will and skills in the world, this is going to be very difficult to deliver and deliver well. And I'm pleased to see that we've got them in the risk register. So I think my question, really is around, it's a moving feast. It is a difficult project to deliver. There are costs, there are resource issues around it. I think they've been captured well in the risk register. Can you explain and provide the committee more assurance about the work you're going to be doing around LGR this year, and also the dynamic approach you're going to be taking to LGR across the cycle in terms of providing that support to officers? Thank you.
When we review the audit plan, so we sign up to quarterly reviews of the audit plan. So when we do that over the summer months, I'll be talking with officers about the LGR risks and whether we need to put any audit work in the plan. So we haven't done that yet, but I would expect that there will be some as we do those reviews and people start to think about where is the assurance needed. So I think you'll see when you get the next progress report that we're showing you a change to the plan, and we might be moving some audits into next year in order to accommodate that work. So I would expect something to appear when we do the reviews, but we haven't got to that point yet in the year.
I was only going to say really that Teresa and I worked together to provide that plan. We did a lot of work. Teresa talks about the audit universe, and I'd not really been exposed to that before. It was a really helpful way of looking at the council as a whole and what assurances we had in place in various areas. And I think if we use that same process again in considering LGR as we move forward, I think when we actually sat with each of the exec directors and talked about the plan, we weren't far enough into LGR to appreciate some of the risks. And actually now we're a few months further in, and obviously we've got a couple of work streams that we're responsible for. So I think it's going to be really helpful for us to have those quarterly meetings and think about that.
Last one, Teresa. I don't know if you talked about it just now and I sort of missed it, but there's a hell of a lot of annual audits requested. What are you going to do, what you have been doing then to make all these come in? Because you only get so many hours a year. I mean, are you trying to get another 100 hours, or how are you going to actually do it?
In terms of the number I've got.
Yeah, I mean, you asked for an audit is requested, KPIs, audit is requested, management of calculations, audit is requested. That goes on and on and on to the end of the report.
Yeah, so I've obviously got a budget.
Yeah, I know you have.
Yeah, sum of money. So basically, I've estimated for each audit how many days I think it is. The contractors get allocated their audits. They will then have a scoping meeting with the relevant sponsor for the audit, and they will come out with a scope based around the audit overarching audit scope objective. And then they'll come back to me and say how many days they think it is. Most of the time we're near enough on par with each other in terms of that expectation. And then I monitor the budget and make sure I can convert the days to money, monitor the budget, make sure we've got enough. If in that process, I think we're getting close to using all our budget or we've used it, then I can have a conversation with Isabel. If she's got more money, we can do more audits. If not, we go to assurance board, and we probably would go to assurance board anyway. We talk that through, and there might be some reprioritising. Some might get moved into the following year.
We know. I mean, how many things get missed? Like David was saying at the early part of the meeting, where he asked for this 5 years ago, and still nothing's been done, and stuff like this. Is there things missed off because we're changing direction and going on to other things which need an audit?
I think if you think when I started, we were just cycling through audits. So therefore, it's very easy to say,
yeah,
we did that one 3 years ago. We don't need to do it yet. But the approach for audit has changed. It has to be risk-based, and we should be thinking about assurance against achievements of what the council is trying to achieve, its priorities, its programmes, its projects. So that's the kind of stance we're taking, but we're not ignoring the wider universe of the service areas as well. But we're not just repeating audits just because. So our conversations were around, are there other assurances? And it's surprising how many other types of assurance that Isabel and I came across when you talk to people. Like, for example, the crematorium, they have, I forget what the institute's called, but they have someone who does a review of the crematorium. So we wouldn't put that in our audit plan. We can rely on other assurances. So there probably is more mapping we could do in order to identify where other assurances are taking place. So I think we're just trying to have a broad view of where we need to focus the work. And just because we have an area doesn't mean to say it's high risk. May not be high risk, may not be much going on in there, may not be any issues. We don't have an endless pot of money that we can just use to audit everything. So we're always going to have to prioritise, and that might mean that some of the less risky no issue areas don't get looked at. But that's that balance of risk, because we just
How do we know which ones you actually stopped? Which ones you're not looking at now, you changed?
Audit universe that tells you when things were last audited, and we're trying to detail where there is assurance elsewhere so that we can see if there's something else we can rely on.
Okay.
So when we show you that, you'll be able to see perhaps where something hasn't had assurance. But then, as I said, there is always that conversation about risk, materiality, issues, how much money is it really? Because there's no point in us auditing something that's maybe only got a 10 grand budget compared to the housing contracts that are millions and millions of pounds. So you've got to be careful, but you put your effort, I suppose, is what we're talking about there.
Beth.
Just wondered how long, when you're using other things that give assurance, so I use the social housing regulator, and whilst incredibly proud of that, I'm wondering how long you would consider that assurance for, because that is something the regulator comes back and looks at very quickly and can change very rapidly. So what period of time is that going to give security for us for?
I think that's a good question as to yes, you're right. How long am I going to rely on any third party assurance? And it is something I've got to consider. I think there is an annual return that they do, so each year, so I can compare their kind of self-assessment annual return to what the regulator says. But you're right, at some point I will have to decide that that is now out of date and I'm not going to rely on it, and therefore when does it come back into what would be quite a high risk area back into the plan for audit purposes, but also talking with the exec directors about what are their indicators that say there's issues, there's risk has gone up, we should be looking at it, because I'm also relying on some of their views because they're in this process every day. I'm not. So I have to take some view from management and their own assurance of what's going on, and then have that overview of when do I think is the right time to be auditing it again.
Apologies, my pet topic. I suppose just what understanding do you have to gain of what, say, the regulator has done? Because that's quite a specific process, and I'm just, I suppose, flagging change of administration. Part of the process was the involvement of the portfolio holder in the governance side of that inspection and the assurance that it gave. And obviously we've had a change of administration, change of portfolio holder. So does that influence your decision around using that?
I think that is something I've got to take into account, because as you say, that's changed, and that assurance was with another portfolio holder. So that might be some questions that I ask about, well, how was the new portfolio holder taken on board with that role, and is that been as good, for want of a better word, as the previous one? And that may, you're quite right, may make me think about, actually I can't rely now on that assurance because things have changed too much that it's different. So they're all things I need to think about when I decide when do I not rely on it.
Yeah. Right, okay. We'll get there. Just to build up on what Councillor Price said regarding LGR, I think that's a really pertinent point, and I think the role of internal audit as we get closer to 2028 should not be underestimated. I think a lot of services may call upon internal audit to provide that independent assurance as we move forward, so they get pretty much like a clean bill of health when we come to that vesting day. So I think that's a very pertinent point. The other point I just wanted to raise, and I didn't see it in the plan for this year, and I appreciate that the plan is always flexible and it's dependent on risk, but was there any consideration around AI, particularly it's playing a prominent role, and how widely it's used within the council, what protocols are in place and what training perhaps have been offered to officers and members alike?
I don't remember it being talked about too much this time. I know in previous years, I think like the year before, we did talk with IT about AI, and they weren't, because there was some AI aspects coming into the project around the digitalisation of all the licensing system. But it didn't get raised as part of the IT conversation, so it might be something that we need to go back and just ask them about whether that is something they want any more work on. Another council has had some work on AI, a more advisory piece of work, which I think was quite useful. I can't remember if I mentioned it at the time, but I can raise it again. I think it's worth raising again because it is topical, isn't it? The AI stuff.
Chair, just briefly. So I appreciate what the officer has said about the plan. We've got 13 I can see here, and that's close to what you delivered last year. Although when we look across the 5 years, when we delivered 12 in the last cycle, that's the lowest we've had since the 2020-2021 cycle. So we are delivering less audit, but I also appreciate what you've been saying in terms of working in that advisory capacity, and I think that's very important going forward. It's often good to do the work before a project is launched, etc. However, and you kind of alluded to it, where you've got you're relying on other sources of assurance out there to yourself. But I guess I do want to pose that question. And size of contracts aside, which was a good point that you made, there is that balance of delivering compliance, and there are, and I mean, I can see that you're doing the general accounting areas that need to be looked at really annually, but what sort of assurance can you provide us? And I know you've got some over 2 years. What sort of assurance can you provide us that the real sort of just the compliance aspects, which was the traditional way of doing audit, what assurance can you provide us that we're going to get a range of coverage, enough coverage across, say, 3 years? Say what you've put forward for next year, what you're delivering this year, and what you delivered last year. What assurance can you give us that there's going to be enough range of compliance work to take place to give us that assurance as we move closer to the winding up of the council? I'm sorry, it was a bit convoluted, but yeah, it's so I appreciate that you're doing the kind of the wider works, but actually the bread and butter of actually getting in and doing that kind of compliance work is really, really important as well. Fair enough to say I've got to take a risk-based approach to it, and that's fair enough. But I don't think we'd be doing our job if we just went, oh, okay, well that's all right, and then it turns out that you didn't do compliance work for 4 years in somewhere, and there's a massive gap. So I think it needs challenge.
But I think some of that is how, what we could do with, which we don't have, and I think as we move into unitaries, it's definitely a starting point, is getting more towards a proper documented assurance framework and assurance maps, because then I'd have something that would be indicating to me whether in a particular area there was issues that I could then pick up on. So without those, we are quite reliant on the conversations we have with everyone and people highlighting issues and maybe indicators and reporting that comes through. So I think that will be a conversation at Assurance Board about the compliance areas as we move into thinking about next year's plan and the end of the council and what we want to pass over, I suppose, assurance-wise to the new council that's taking on board, that we're passing them over with something that is not kind of a pile of rubbish as such. We want to give the new council a proper assurance that says we are happy with all of these areas. But it is always going to be a balance because there's a finite budget, and if you start to move to, we want to do assurance in all of the kind of compliance type areas because we want to hand that over, then some of the other things, we're giving assurance around key risks and objectives may not happen. But then as we move to the end, some of those things that the council wants to achieve will be less and less and come to an end. So it's finding that right balance that gets the plan in the right place.
just want to make a comment, and it's also building on what John said earlier as well, is that, you know, the reality is it's going to cost a lot of money to deliver LGR, and, you know, at county, I think the estimate in their report is 50 million to deliver it across the county, and they are already undergoing a process of having consultants come in, and then they will be testing the value of that consultancy work. They're not writing a blank check. But John made the point that, you know, every aspect of this council is going to kind of want to get itself signed off, okay? And there's going to be assurance work. So what assurances can officers provide that we are investing in LGR as it moves forward to also support
Is that
the
to do with
internal
audit, or is that to do with cabinet?
to also support the internal audit's delivery of these assurances that will be required when we get to the sign-off point, because it would work with, because this is a plan now, but you might need to do twice as much as this work, you know, or the council may ask for it. Sorry, Chair.
Well, the audit will be doing it, wouldn't it? The cabinet will be doing it, and then the audit will check on the cabinet if they by to the audit.
Well, I think the audit have got a plan of what they've got to do. If there's more they want to do, they're going to need to be resourced.
But when you got to think that we're never going to be able to do everything and give all of that kind of assurance across. The council has, the new unitary has to be legal and safe. So you have to focus on what assurance you can give about legality and safe as with what you're passing over. So as long as you can say people are safe, we've done all our DBS checks, we're handing you over that's safe. You know, we're doing what we should do legally in licensing, but that there isn't going to be enough money for all of that assurance to come from internal audit. Some of that is going to come from the other lines of assurance, which will be from management. And that line, it might be from the second line, which for us will be, because we don't really have compliance departments in that respect, it might be from other committees and oversight boards that are in place that give assurance. It can't come all from internal audit. There's not enough money for that.
No, I haven't got pot of gold. I do think, sorry, I'm probably going slightly off the session that we will have about the audit universe. I think it's going to be really helpful to have that as we have done before, as more of like a training session where people can interact and talk about. So we can talk about the process we went through. You can challenge us on that process, and we can then we talked about reviewing things on a quarterly basis. So I think there's probably just an opportunity for all of us to throw all of our ideas in, and you know, Teresa and I don't pretend that we know all the answers to all of this. None of us do. But it's helpful if we have that discussion, we have that open and honest discussion, because I think, like you say, things will change at a very quick pace.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can I?
The application note says you have to consider those. You can't, because the global standards say use people with internal audit qualifications. The SIPFA note says no, you've got to consider people with what they call CCAB qualifications as well. So I'm trying to cover off both there. You're right, I could add that bit in. I thought I had said something about that, but in terms of our charter, we are going to have someone who is a certified internal auditor accredited qualification. We're not just going to have CCAB people who are qualifications. And we only have to consider, we don't actually have to have a CCAB person.
Thank you for that. If there ain't no more on that piece, the recommendation from the report is recommended that members review and approve the internal audit plan 26-27 and the internal audit charter and mandate. Do we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on now to item 8, anti-fraud and corruption, whistleblowing and anti-money laundering policy. Pages 131, 134. And Isabel, do you want to move that?
Yes, this is just
The annual.
this is just a very quick update on these policies. It's mainly just name changes, so there isn't any change in the actual policy. It's just making sure those policies are shown up to date with the officers that are actually responsible for each of those items. So I'm happy to take comments.
I've got 2, James.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the name change thing, having looked at these on the council website, can we just get Councillor Schmierer changed, as he's not the chair of Audit Committee anymore? On the anti-fraud and corruption policy, it's listed as Councillor Schmierer still.
Dad, I'm not listed.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Ben?
Yeah, no, okay, well, just a quick one. So the actual policies weren't even included in the documentation sent through. Okay, so I don't think that's good enough personally, because they should be attacked, not in the physical. Sorry, yeah, sorry. Well, thank you, Councillor. You don't want to hear me anyway, trust me. But so the papers weren't actually included, the actual documentation. Now, I think we've gone through this in terms of just light touch refresh now 2 or 3 times, which means these policies haven't actually been looked at. Now, I know that there's been a turnover in executive staff. Yeah, so maybe we're not aware of that, but perhaps before the reports are kind of done, I'm pretty sure it's well over 5 years since we've actually done a proper review. So I think a question for yourself, okay, on this, okay, is how is the effectiveness of the whistleblowing policy actively measured and verified to ensure that frontline staff feel secure using the mechanism without fear of reprisal? So how are you actually monitoring the effectiveness of this policy? Because if you're not doing that and you're not actually doing a proper refresh of it, I think that's a weakness. Now, I say that with the fact that we've got 2 years to go, so I do understand that, but I'm kind of a bit disappointed it's not been done, this work over the.
Do you think that's something then that we should put on a future agenda?
Quite possibly. I think it's worth considering the policy and policy refresh, because I don't think it's been done for a while.
That was my decision not to put all of the papers.
Okay, yeah.
I just said I just said I think it's appropriate just to put a link because the changes were so minor.
No, that's
so
fine.
I'll take that as a reflection. But I'm happy to consider, and I think all 3 of us have been involved in whistleblowing type policies recently, and we've done an update to our thoughts, really looked at that policy in detail. So it might be an idea for the 3 of us to go away and maybe consider bringing that to another committee.
Is that all right, Chair?
Yes, fine. How often has it been used?
How often are they used?
No, how often has people whistleblowed?
I don't see all the whistleblowing. I think they go directly to Teresa.
Teresa's
how many emails does Teresa get a day?
She thought she was getting out of this report. Yeah.
I had a spate recently since Christmas. I had about 3 come through. Before that, much less frequent before that.
Okay, so do you think this is actually working?
So how it happens is, although they don't necessarily all have to come to me, they just are emailing me, because one of the names in the policy, it could come to the other names, but we then get together as a panel and we talk about them and then decide whether they are truly a whistleblowing concern. If they are, then we follow the policy and instigate action, investigation, and then.
Yeah, what I was asking is, do you think this whistleblowing is actually working when people complain? When they put a complaint in and you get together with your group and.
I think based on the ones I've had, I think we're working okay, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
John, oh yeah.
sorry, could I just say, Alex has just confirmed that the last time this came to committee was in June 2025.
Yeah.
So we'll go back and have a look at that,
yeah.
yeah.
That was just changing of names. That wasn't the policy.
Okay, so what they can,
Well,
yeah,
Policy hasn't been reviewed in a long time.
okay, well, we can do that then.
That wasn't reviewed, but that was talked about it at the meeting. John?
Yeah, just building, I think, on what Councillor Price was saying. Because obviously these have sort of been updated, I'm just wondering in terms of how you raise awareness of these new policies with staff, and again, what level of training is provided to not just staff, but also members as well.
We can take that away and make sure that there's some kind of comms around those updates.
David?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've gone back to read the policies that are on the website as well. And again, mainly being because it talked about personal amendments, the anti-money laundering policy, which has been updated, still refers to Alistair Rush.
Wow.
So that's not being amended. So can that be amended, please? That's at paragraph 8.1 under section 8.
Can I just come in as well? Sorry.
Let David finish and you
Sorry.
come through me if you want.
Sorry.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. So I think that needs to be amended, obviously, for the appropriate officer. And again, following the last 2 points that have been there, what we've been told is that this policy is being reviewed for personnel changes. But what this committee has not received, and it's not received since, let me have a look, since July 2023 meeting, is we've received no information, as far as I can see, to say how effective these policies are in practice. So we've had no information about the number of whistleblowing concerns that we've received and what the outcomes are. The only report on fraud, if that's the right term, if members will remember, is something about a deed for a grant that was being signed by the wrong person. I can't remember much about it, but that's the thing that rings a bell. And I think this committee needs to get assurance on how effective these policies are, not the fact that policies are in place. And coming back to Councillor Price again, I've read them and I think the policies are fairly sound. So there's nothing wrong with the policy. The issue is that this committee has not had any assurance at all to say that they're effective in practice. So the issue about training, you know, that's been done, publicity, for example, there's nothing about that or concerns received. And in fact, when I've gone back and through, the committee actually did receive a report that was called Annual Report on Counter Fraud Arrangements that was introduced following Internal Audit 2022 review of counter fraud arrangements. And in there it was recommended that the council presents an annual report on its counter fraud arrangements to the audit committee, which hasn't happened. And again, as I went back to what we talked about, said we want information, but it's not come back. And I think there's something missing in how the committee's either updating its work programme or agreeing what its recommendations are so that it can see that they've been acted upon by officers, so that we don't lose track of these things in going forward. We used to have a action plan or an action update that used to be on every agenda, but that dropped off a number of meetings ago. So again, I'd like to see that report reintroduced, please. And that report, I believe, needs to be reintroduced and presented committee before it considers the annual governance statement. Because if there's something in there that's important, then it needs to be reflected in the AGS, and it doesn't just need to come in the AGS. Members need to be informed about it beforehand. Can I also ask, please, if that's okay, Chair, within the counter fraud policy, it says on page 7 that ELT is required to submit an annual self-assessment of those processes, which are about how effective the systems are, for inclusion with the council's AGS. So my question is, when did ELT last complete an annual self-assessment process? because there was nothing included in last year's AGS. And will this be evidenced in the 25-26 AGS? And again, I think this comes back to the fact that policy is not being presented, so we can't see it, we can't challenge it because it's on the internet and it's not in the agenda papers. So a couple of points there, Chairman, if I may. Thank you.
Anyone want to answer these?
I'll take those comments back.
I mean, audit is getting longer and longer and longer now. We've actually got extra 2 meetings this term as well.
Yeah.
So 7 and 4, we've got 6. And it looks like there's other things where, like David was talking about and I was talking about earlier, which get dropped off.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't hear about it ever again because we've actually moved into something new. So the old stuff just disappears. That's put in a file somewhere in the filing cabinet until someone said, well, we ain't had a report since 1922, which he said on the whistleblowing. So how
We'll pick up. I mean,
we
I think
did
there's a few actions that have come out of this meeting that are obviously we're in the first meeting of the year. So
Yep.
let's see if we can maybe have an action plan for some of the things. I think we as officers we're often constrained by time, and obviously there's five main reports in this meeting, and it's we don't like to overload this committee too much with too many, but there's things that we need to have in their statutory meetings. But I think last year we did pick some of this stuff up by having informal meetings, and it might be that there's an opportunity to do that as well as have some statutory meetings as well. But let's pick up them as actions and we can consider them.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, just because I just have to come really quick. Thank you for raising those points, David. All right, I share. I appreciate you doing the work there and noting those. And I mean, this is actually borne out in the reports that the internal audit officer has done, where there's shown there's an inconsistency of information on the websites, and we've just seen another prime example of that. Right? Okay. And then at the same time, we're seeing that action points of delegated decisions at cabinet are not getting noted down and following procedure. And then we've got things that are on a work program here, and again, just disappearing and just falling off. So, you know, I think that again was brought out in the internal audit report, and so I agree that these action points are here, and let's have some assurance that they actually do get actioned as well. All right, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Chair, I'll just be very brief. So as you'll note in one of the recommendations on the Cabinet report and the decision-making process is to create a proper action track. And now we're in the process of doing that along with updating how we do the forward plan. So we're going to be doing that and also going back and reviewing at least a year's worth of decisions to ensure that stuff is captured properly. So what we'll be doing over the next, I think it's by the deadline is the end of July, is going back and looking at all the actions from meetings, seeing what's been carried out, and then saying, is it still relevant? Do members still want to see it? And we'll bring that before the committees and let members know for the relevant points what needs to come back. So that is in progress from our side, and we'll be working on that.
Thank you. Any other questions on the whistleblower? No, we'll move on then. No, we won't. This report is for noting. The recommendation is to recommend that your committee approve the report and approve the policies. We all agreed with that. Yes, thank you. We move on. Item 9, corporate risk register. And that's Isabel as well to take us through this one as well. And this is without the 7 green papers one, is it? You can't talk about the green papers, okay? I'll do that afterwards.
Okay, so this is an update to the Council's corporate risk register as at the end of the Q4 for the financial year 25-26. And we're doing things slightly differently today. We used to take the risk register to Cabinet and then look at it at Audit Committee. What we're trying to do now is switch that around so that the Audit Committee has the opportunity to consider the risk register and then possibly make recommendations or provide some narrative to Cabinet. Cabinet will be looking at this paper tomorrow, so I think it's an opportunity for you to comment on those risks and to ask any questions. Obviously, the risk register has changed considerably over the last few months. As Councillor Price talked about, we've included a lot of the LGR risks on here. We are looking at really high level strategic risks in this corporate risk register, and we're trying to make sure that we provide those and present those in a really transparent and open way. Key thing as well is that obviously we worked with external consultants to ensure that we had the appropriate risk appetite. So that was a really helpful way forward for us. And yeah, happy to take any questions.
Mike.
Yeah, thanks for that, Isabel. And I just want to talk about page 140 and the new risks, which are all around LGR, and clearly all well without outside our risk appetite. I'm just interested in how you have, at this very early stage, how you've calculated the current risk score. So what are the who have you spoken to? What type of assessment have you made? What sort of data have you used and information have you used to arrive at those? Because I mean they are high, and I have to say, having been centrally involved in it, if you'd asked me to score it, I wouldn't know where to begin at this stage. All I know is that there are risks. So I'm just intrigued as to how we've come to that conclusion.
I think there's been a lot of work with people that have been closely involved with the LGR group, you know, the actual Norfolk CEOs group. So the lead officers, including Lou and obviously those deputies that are working with her, have helped to provide that score. And then we as ELT looked at that score, obviously as a sort of reflecting that back and considering it. I wouldn't take by any case that it's perfect, but we have to make that best guess that we can so that we are ensuring that we are providing that element of transparency around the possibility of those risks going forward. And so we will obviously update that on a quarterly basis and make sure that we can manage those risks as best we can.
Thank you. Ben, you want to say?
Yeah, just a quick one, Chair. So first of all, thank you for bringing it. I also appreciate that officers are bringing this to committee for comments and for observations ahead of cabinet, and that I think will help inform cabinet's work. And I think that's good practice. We should keep that going. I'm really pleased to see the risk appetite score embedded in the document as well, and I think that again it will help make the document stronger and more usable kind of going forward. I think it's, as Councillor Stonard has already indicated, having the LGR sections are really important. And as we've already seen, we can see that there's a legal challenge happening at Norfolk County Council. And so I'm sure this is a dynamic document and you meet quite regularly.
What's your question?
Oh, okay. So sorry, Chair. So the question is, so without giving you observations about the work, because the Chair doesn't want it. All right, COP 21, climate change risk to the council and the city's residents. Climate change is something that is only exponentially getting worse. We're seeing massive weather changes, flooding, dry spells. We had the hottest hottest May on record. How are you justifying removing this away from being a corporate risk? Thank you.
No one?
No, she's thinking.
Okay.
So I think that this is kind of like obviously an opportunity for, as I said before, for you to challenge those decisions, and I'm happy to take that decision away and consider it. I think there's a risk around Norwich as a city, and there's a risk around the universe, so to speak, and that corporate risk. But I think
because you've got emergency planning, it's quite.
Yeah. So
climate change is something
that
will impact the city, but every resident and the rivers.
So would you like us to reconsider that as a risk? So I mean, if the committee want us to put that proposal forward as okay.
Discussion on this proposal? I was just wondering how that was going to work, how we can actually do it.
So I think what.
But no, totally against climate change and what stop all and all.
So I think the fact that if this committee proposes that that's put back onto the corporate risk register, then we can make a note of it in the minutes. We can inform Councillor Schmierer so that he goes into cabinet tomorrow night and he says, audit committee discussed this last night. They thought that this should go back onto the corporate risk register, and he can either say, I'm proposing that we do accept that, or we don't accept that. And I think, and then cabinet can update the paper. I think that's the process we can go through. Yes? Yeah.
I'm just, I don't think I've heard why it was removed. I don't think I've had, so I don't understand why it was removed. And that might help me to make a decision about whether that was the right move or not, and whether I should vote for it to go back. So I don't understand what I would be voting for, and would really be really helpful if officers could explain why. Yeah, well, maybe the right officers aren't here, but why it was deemed less of a risk when clear, which is counterintuitive to me.
Apologies, I won't pretend that I can answer that question in full, but we will get an answer tomorrow to make sure that there's something to support the background behind that.
Thank you, Chair. Just to help members in with as the points Councillor Stannard has raised, is so that we can perhaps amending the proposal to say that with the information that audit has currently, they would like to ask for that, ask that it's considered and that the information is provided to Cabinet to inform their decision making at their meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, I suppose it was following on from that, because having rationale, but even for the other things, we have limited rationale for why things are being stepped down. And I think for us to feel informed, could we ask going forward that when we've got those items that we've generally got just a brief rationale, but also where they sit alongside other corporate risks, I suppose, because if a risk is similar to another that's being captured, we might understand that that one has become more relevant or more accurate in grasping what's going on. So that could be de-escalated kind of thing. But at the moment, because we've only got, you'll have we've got 1, then 21, 24, 30, 37. You kind of don't see them in the round, I suppose, is my challenge as well. So I think just fleshing out the information would be really helpful, just because I suppose I'm getting my head around it as a new member of committee.
Is that a reason what's happened here for these to be took, or someone's just going, well, we ain't got time to do this, we're doing something else instead? And who's making those decisions? I mean, they're not coming here.
No, I think when we worked with the Good Governance Group, they suggested that we had our corporate risk register was kind of, there was a lot of risks on there, and obviously there are the directorate risks register, which we've got. So what we try to do is to almost make them more visible by having less of them, do you know what I mean, and making them more focused. And I suppose what we haven't probably done is detailed our thought process on that and made it seem a little bit more transparent for you. I'm happy for us to take this away and give some kind of more of a background on that understanding and what we've done.
And bring that back when?
Bring that back. I could bring that back. We're bringing to the next committee anyway, because we'll probably bring the first quarter, won't we?
So that'll be
so when we bring the first quarter, we'll talk about why we changed that corporate risk register. Yeah.
Yeah. Beth?
Just linking in with the directorate risk register, I'm wondering, where is it monitored, where things have moved between the two that they might need to re-escalate? Because if something has been on the corporate risk register, it's clearly been a big thing, and that actually it might just have dropped enough to be considered that it's gone to the directorate. But where's that? I suppose is there a way that we can see that, or is that monitored in a different forum to understand that it might move back up again rather than just going down?
I've got 3 people, I'll take them all together. James?
Yeah, well, thank you. Because actually mine's a direct point,
There you go.
Councillor Jones. I may be misremembering this, but I'm sure that we've talked about the Directorate Risk Register before, and we've talked about this committee having sight of it so that we can understand exactly as Councillor Jones is saying, when items fall out of corporate and go into directorate. And I'm sure we were told before there was no problem with us having it, but I may be misremembering that.
John, it's all the same, or?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just building
Yeah.
up on what the previous councillors are saying. And again, pardon my ignorance because I'm relatively new. I'm assuming that the council has a risk management strategy.
Yeah.
So my expectation would be within that strategy, you would have details in escalating and de-escalating risks, and then how those are going to be articulated back to this committee. So we have a sort of fuller understanding. And again, apologies, I haven't read your strategy, but if it's not, it should be very, very clear in terms of what guides how things from perhaps a business level get escalated onto the corporate register, and those that are de-escalated for whatever reason in terms of it's more managed the risk. But that needs to be sort of crystal clear for, I think, for this committee to have that level of understanding and openness to challenge.
I have a suggestion. Shall we have a session with the corporate risk register, with the strategy and with how the departmental feed into, rather than having a report is still going to be very kind of limited to a number of pages, whereas I think it feels a little bit like we need a little bit more of a discussion and a thought about looking at those departmental risk registers. So
I just talk about a training session or a proper meeting where we can make decisions.
I think a training session to start off with, and then we can decide what paper we want or how we want the next paper to be prepared. Yeah, and it might be that we can fit that in either before we do the Q1 monitor or between the Q1 and the Q2, so we have ample time to have a discussion about moving forward and challenge any of those decisions that we've made previously.
Okay. Beth?
You. And I'd really welcome that. I think alongside that is the regular access to that data. That I don't, is it on a Power BI dashboard, or what format is it? That we're trying to be a more transparent council, that actually those risks, are they accessible to us? I don't know. Are they on SharePoint? But actually that should be something that there's open, transparent oversight of. And is that something we can publish more so that people can query and question, I suppose would be my ask.
Maybe we can try and address that. I would assume they would be on the councillors' portal that you've got, but I don't know that for sure, so I won't. But you know, we can look at that, and as if we have this sort of training session, stroke, you know, conversation, we can think about those.
Yeah, sounds right. It's good to me. Kate, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just really briefly, any training session conversation, could that maybe be open to all members if they wish
Well,
to?
it should be, because any member could be on this committee next time as sub.
Yeah, that just sounds very, very valuable.
Yeah, sounds good. Right.
Take that away.
We need to move into closed session. James, you want to take us out first?
Sorry, I want to make a very quick point before we go into closed session, because actually I'd like to, I think, probably give congratulations to whoever's put this report together, because I've sat here before and moaned about the fact that Corp 07 is entirely exempt, and so I'm pleased to see that we've got more references to Corp 07 in the public domain. Thank you. But I'll talk more about the exempt bit in a minute.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, we need to go into closed session now, and I will move that we.
Chair.
Yes, Mike.
So are we're going to do the work programme in closed session?
No. We'll come back to the work, and we'll come back to the recommendation.
Okay.
On this corporate risk register. We're going to come back to the corporate risk register, agree the recommendation, which is to approve it and whatever, and then never go on to the other one. Yeah. Right. So I remove that we exclude the press and public from the meeting during the considerations of items on the ground that involves the likely disclosure of exempt information and specific in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of Local Government Act 1972. Do I have a second? Thank you very much. We now move to the bill. All the
Chair, could you formally have a vote on having that training session, please?
Yeah, do we agree that we have a training session? All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. With the public recommendation report is to recommend that the audit committee notes and identify risks and direction of travel. Thank you. We agree with that?
Agree, Chair.
Thank you. Well, on to the last thing is the audit committee work programme, pages 153, 160, and Alex, you're going to take me through this bit, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. So members have the 26-27 Audit Committee Work Programme
Yeah.
before them. We can take any questions on items that are scheduled, but I think as part of this item, Isabel wanted to provide a quick update on our recruitment of independent persons.
Well, there's one of the two things that we need to put in now,
As well.
which has been agreed at tonight's meeting. And so we've got to make space for that. Is there anything on here that we don't need in there? Well, I was asking officers, I'll ask committee in, but yes, pardon?
No, I would say we're going to need to cover all of this at the right time.
So the new administration is asking us to have extra meetings again.
We like to do the thorough work, you know, we all do as councillors, don't we, Chair? So.
Well, I was just wondering, I mean, that's a bit unusual really, and I'll take David first and then Mike afterwards. David?
I'm sorry to disappoint you, Chair, but I think there's probably 2 items that need to be added to the work
Yes,
programme.
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
That aren't there.
Yeah.
The last meeting, the work programme report stated that there's going to be a report on the Code of Corporate Governance.
Yep.
To me, and that's not on the work programme. So when do officers expect they'll all be presented to the committee, please?
Okay, and which was the other one?
And the other one is if those who attended will know, back in February, at the committee meeting in February, I made reference to the council's compliance or otherwise with the CITFA Code of Financial Management in both the AGS or the local Code of Corporate Governance, and asked that a review of the officer's self-assessment against the code be presented or be added to the work programme. But again, like the Code of Corporate Governance, that's not there either.
Okay,
I believe it was agreed.
But that one, I think, Robert?
Thank you, Chair. I believe that the monitoring officer has done work on that. I can't give an update more on that, but I can take that one away because I have seen some things around it, but I can't confirm anything more than that at this meeting. So I'll take that away and ask the monitoring officer when they return from leave about that and report back to the committee.
Well,
Yeah. Well, thanks for the response, but I think the issue is that I think committee should be saying we'd like it to be added to the work programme. I understand the response, but I think formally you should be asking for it to be on there, like the self-assessment against the Code of Financial Management. Again, it's probably something the external auditor would like to see as well, but again.
Just referring back to my previous comment about AI, I mean, what I've heard about AI here today has alarmed me. And I think we should be auditing our response and seeking assurance. So I think we should add, I don't know what to call it, apart from AI risk, in all its forms as have been outlined into the work programme, because it sounds to me like it's really important.
yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of build on what David was saying, in terms of the annual governance statement, there is an addendum that on the governance framework, delivering good governance framework by SIPFA, and the local code of corporate governance should sit alongside the AGS. Now, I appreciate the AGS is coming in July, but it's now a requirement that the local code should support the background, because it talks about the 7 principles of good governance. So when you basically present the annual governance statement, it should also have, sitting behind that, the local code. Certainly there is time, because even if it doesn't go in July, you would still have to get that sort of signed off before the statement of accounts in terms of the timeframes.
I think, apologies, Chair, I think the mystic chords of memory are coming back, that I think that is what is ready, and is essentially that can be added to the next meeting. I think that, from what I've seen, that has been prepared, and it is ready to sit alongside the AGS. So that's fine for the next meeting. And what I'd suggest with the AI item is we put it, what we do is we put it, essentially not give it a date yet, and we can then work with the chair to find a date that's appropriate, and then bring it to the next committee as a programmed item once we've spoken to officers.
Anything else?
Yeah, I've just spotted an item about all members of the committee have attended effective audit committee training facilitated by Ian Fifield. Is that additional to the training we voted to have earlier? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
The training not for that yet, no, but we'll get that sent around to members as soon as it's confirmed and work out when dates are appropriate.
Anything else?
Chair, can we just double check that that everything was captured from what David was saying needed to come? There was a few other points. Can we just make sure it was all captured?
Can we make sure?
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Apologies, Chair. So if we could take a vote on the 3 items that have been proposed to go onto this work programme. So if we want to start with the AI item, and then David, if you could repeat those 2 that you mentioned for me, that would be great. Thank you.
One's the code of local code of corporate governance, and the second one was the SIPFA code of financial management and the self-assessment that sits behind it. Thank you.